Hello, friends. I am so excited to begin reading our first chapter book that we will enjoy together this school year. And this book is called Night of the Spadefoot Toads. And this story is about a young boy. He's in fifth grade, and he has recently moved from his home in the desert, and he has moved across the country to a new town in Massachusetts. And he's brand new at a new school, and he's trying to fit in at the new school, and he's trying to get adjusted. But he really misses home in the desert, and he really misses some of his friends, and he really misses some of the animals and the wildlife from that desert ecosystem and environment. And we are going to begin reading through chapter 1 together today. You have the words in front of you so you can follow along as I'm reading. And then after we read through chapter 1, I want you to go back into Google Classroom and pull up your Google form so you can answer some review questions about this first chapter. If you can't remember an answer, you can always come back to the video and you can go back through the video until you find a specific page or a specific part that can help you answer the questions. Are you ready to read the first chapter of Night of the Spadefoot Toads? All right, here we go. Chapter 1. That new science teacher, Mrs. Tibbets, is 100 years old. You'll see, Frankie announces. 200 years old, another boy says. Ben Maroney ignores them as he heads down the hall. Jenny Ferreira is walking beside him. The other kids in the fifth grade class are stretched out in a loose line up and down the hallways, headed to science class. Mrs. Tibbets isn't that old, Jenny tells Ben, and she's not a new teacher. She's just been out for a while. My brother had her when he was in fifth grade a couple of years ago. Ben nods. He likes Jenny. She's one of the few kids who talk to him. Maybe just because he sits behind her in class. He's been at Edinburgh Elementary for 2 months, but he still feels new. And now they've got a new science teacher. Well, she's new to Ben at least. Everyone else in the class seems to know her. She's 1,000,000 years old, Frankie shouts so everyone in the hall can hear. He bends over and hobbles down the hall like an old woman, and Tommy Miller and Dennis Damio laugh. Frankie thinks he's a lot funnier than he is, but there are always kids who will laugh at him, even when he's being mean. It's strange to get a new science teacher at the end of March. Ben wonders where Mrs. Tibbets has been, and more importantly, why she came back. When Ben walks into the classroom, he doesn't see the new science teacher, but he does see mice. They're in a new cage on the table against the back wall, next to the stacks of textbooks and papers. He figures there are 6 mice in it. Ben knows something about mice, but not as pets. He knows about mice as food for diamondback rattlesnakes He's seen rattlesnakes eat mice lots of times. There are no diamondback rattlesnakes in Edinburgh, Massachusetts. Ben's pretty sure of that. The rattlesnakes he used to watch were at the Desert Museum in Tucson, Arizona, where he lived until February, along with whip snakes and sidewinders and horned toads and chuckwalla lizards. All he's seen since he moved to Massachusetts are some squirrels and chipmunks in his backyard and some birds at the window feeder. Ben walks to the cage to get a closer look at the mice. Ryan Brisson starts pounding on the desk not far from the table. Ben! Ben! He yells. Sit here! With the new teacher, there aren't any rules yet, and everyone is thinking that they can sit anywhere they want. Frankie, Tommy, and Dennis have all claimed desks together on the other side of the room. Ryan's a skinny little kid who wears glasses. One of the lenses is covered over with a patch, and the other lens magnifies his good eye. And he's always peering at people out of that one big eye. He's the most hyper kid that Ben has ever met. It's like his mother gives him a pound of sugar right before he leaves for school each day, and he drives Ben crazy. He drives the other kids crazy. He even drives the teachers crazy. Ben wishes he had a real friend. Not like Jenny, who only talks to him because she sits in front of him. Or Ryan, who is officially wacko. He'd like to find someone like Toby, his best friend, back in Tucson. Sit here, Ryan says again, pounding on the desk like a bass drum. It's the only empty seat. This kid is a human noise machine. He'd be noisy even if he were sitting still, which he never is. Ben glances around the classroom. The new teacher, Mrs. Tibbetts, hasn't arrived yet. Teachers are usually pretty good about not leaving a classroom unattended, but sometimes it happens. He looks at the mice again, and then he thinks about Mr. Tompkins, the director of the children's programs at the Desert Museum. Ben loved that museum. He'd taken every summer class that they offered for his age group, and he had talked his parents into taking him there almost every Saturday during the school year. Mr. Tompkins had promised Ben that when he was a little older, he could help out with one of the summer programs. But then in December, Ben's dad was offered a new job, and 2 months later, his family packed up and left Tucson. And now he's stuck here, looking at mice in Massachusetts. He doesn't even have his souvenirs from the museum. The box that held his favorite things from his bedroom got lost in the move, and the moving company can't find it. Ryan is still pounding on the desk, calling for Ben, but it's like the kid has forgotten what he really wants, and now he just enjoys the sound of his own pounding and chanting. Here, 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 he's saying. Ryan Brisson, Frankie Murley shouts out in a creaky voice. Ryan Brisson, could you kindly shut your trap for once in your life? He's still imitating an old woman. Dennis and Tommy and a couple of the other boys who always laugh at Frankie's jokes let out loud guaffas. Mrs. Tibbets still hasn't arrived, and the kids are all standing up, talking and making noise. And the longer there's not a teacher in the room, the wilder it gets. Even the mice in the cage are agitated now, running around like the students in the room. Ben knows how to handle mice. He undoes the latch and reaches in and scoops one up in his hand. Then he latches the door shut and he lets the mouse run from hand to hand, putting one hand out in front of the other that's holding it. Hey! Wow! What are you doing? Ryan jumps out of his seat and skips over to where Ben is holding the mouse. Are you supposed to be doing that? No way, another kid said. Old Miss Tibbets will kill you. They're probably for some science experiment or something. Other kids gather around. Ben is holding the mouse close to his face, looking at its twitching nose and its bright eyes. And he thinks about the workers at the museum and how they fed the mice to snakes. At first, he was a little upset, but Mr. Tompkins had explained that this was all part of the cycle of life. It's sad, he said, but all species depend on other forms of life to live. That's why there's so many mice, to make sure the species survives. And of course, we're at the top of the food chain. There's a lot of us, but that's just because there's no one to eat us. You should put that back, Jenny said to Ben, before Miss Tibbets gets here. She's twisting her fingers through her hair like she's the one who's going to get in trouble. It's okay, Ben said. I just want to see it for a minute. And Ryan reaches for the mouse, trying to get it out of Ben's hands. Let me hold him, he says. I'll be careful. No, Ryan, Ben says, twisting around to shield the mouse. But Ryan manages to grab Ben's wrist with one hand. Wait, Ben yells. But Ryan clamps down on the little animal with his hand, and afraid that the mouse will get crushed, Ben lets go. Ryan lifts it up into the air like it's a trophy or something. I've got it! I've got it! He shrieks. It's squirmy! Well, duh, Frankie sneers. Well, duh, 3 other boys echo. Ryan tries to hold on to the mouse, but it crawls out of his hand and runs down his arm. Ah! He yells, and the whole class starts screaming. The mouse leaps out of Ryan's arm and lands on the floor, and it skirters under the desk looking for a safe place to hide. But there's no safe place, not with a bunch of 5th graders after it. Get it! Get it! Frankie shouts in his old woman voice. Killer mouse on the loose! 3 or 4 kids squeal and run to the opposite side of the room, like it really is a killer mouse and it might hurt them. It climbed down my arm! Get it! Get it! Ryan is dancing around the circle of kids who are all on their hands and knees looking for the mouse. 3 or 4 of them corner it in the front of the room. I'll get it, Ben says, pushing his way through the crowd. He's about to scoop it up when another voice yells out and everybody freezes where they are. What's going on in here? Ben turns to see. a woman standing in the door of the classroom. There's a moment when nobody says anything, and then everyone runs to their seats, trying not to laugh, even though they know they're in trouble. It's funny and scary at the same time. Now is Ben's chance to catch the mouse. So he kneels down and scoops it up, and then he turns to face the teacher. Mrs. Tibbets is an older woman, but nowhere near 100 years old. She stands straight and tall, not bent over at all. Ben's never really good at guessing how old grown-ups are, but he figures she's about as old as his grandmother, Maroney. Her long graying hair is pulled back behind her ears in a braid that reaches partway down her back. She's wearing a bulky wool sweater and a long skirt, but the most interesting thing about her is her feet. She's wearing a pair of old leather hiking boots. Ben has never seen a teacher in hiking boots. Before anyone can say anything else, Frankie stands and points at Ben. He let the mouse out. Frankie sounds happy. A lot of people like to see other people get in trouble, but Frankie loves it. He let the mouse out. I told him not to. Mrs. Tibbets looks at Ben with her eyes squinted. Ben holds the mouse up in his hands. He can feel his own heart beating. It's okay. I caught it, he says. Put it back in the cage, please, she says. Everyone, in their seats. The entire classroom watches as Ben walks across the room. He opens the cage door and slips the mouse back in. The rescued animal scurries around the cage and jumps over a couple of other mice until it reaches a corner, huddles like nothing unusual has happened. Mrs. Tibbet tells Ben to find a seat and walks over to a small teacher's desk in the front of the class. Here, Ben, Ryan shouts, pounding on the desk next to him. Sit here. There's nowhere else to sit, so Ben slides into the vacant desk. Ryan gives him a lopsided smile. Ben looks away. He feels like he's balancing on a tightrope. He's trying to be nice to Ryan, but not too nice. Ben doesn't want to be mean, but the kid is too hyper to be a good friend. And Ben knows that being nice to Frankie's favorite victim will make him a target too. And it's hard enough to make his head hurt. Mrs. Tibbets writes her name on the board and stands at the front of the class for a moment waiting. It gets very quiet. Even Ryan seems to be holding still, which is a minor miracle. My name is Mrs. Tibbets, and I'll be teaching you science for the rest of the year. Most of you probably know I've been a teacher here at Edinburgh for many years. I took a little time off, and now I'm back. The teacher walks around to the front of her desk, taking her time. Ben sneaks another glance at her hiking boots. I expect you to sit in your seats the moment you come to class, whether I am here or not. She pauses and looks around. And please, do not touch anything in this room unless you ask my permission. Especially animals in cages. Animals are living things and need to be treated carefully. They're not toys. Frankie turns and looks at Ben and wags his finger. Mrs. Tibbets walks over and puts a hand on his shoulder. Ah! Frankie squawks, like he's being strangled. Dennis laughs. Mrs. Tibbets glares at Frankie and then returns to the board at the front of the class. She writes down a bunch of words and asks the kids to copy them into their notebooks so that they can look them up for homework. Ben wonders why she just doesn't hand out a sheet with the words on them. While the kids are writing down the words, Mrs. Tibbets patrols the aisles. When Mrs. Tibbets passes Ben's desk, he notices that her hiking boots are a little muddy. He wonders if she walked to school or something. And then he looks back over at the mice again. Mrs. Tibbets walks down the row of desks and then up the next aisle. When she gets to Ben's desk, she leans over his paper. "I finished," Ben said. She reaches out her wrinkled hand and jabs a short, cracked fingernail at a word on the paper. Mrs. Crutcher has fingernail polish on her fingers, Ben thinks, not Mrs. Tibbets. Ben looked at the word under her finger, and he sees that he accidentally left out the T in nocturnal. He already knows what the word means, something that comes out at night. He fixes the spelling. The teacher leaned over the desk a little farther and asks in a soft voice, "What is your name?" "Ben," he says. "Ben Maroney." Mrs. Tibbets' sweater doesn't smell like school. It smells like the outdoors, like wood smoke and fresh air. "Good," she says, looking right at him. The lines around her eyes and mouth turn down a little, making her look sad. "Ben, please don't touch the mice again. Do you understand me?" Ben feels his face getting hot. He nods, but he wants to defend himself too. "I've taken care of mice before," he mutters. "I know about them." "They're not pets," she said. "I know how to hold them," Ben says. But Mrs. Tibbets has already straightened up and started to walk away. "If they're not pets, what are they for?" Ben asks a little louder, and a couple of kids turn around and look back at him. Mrs. Tibbets looks back too, her eyebrows raised. Ben can feel that he's pushing it, but he wants to know. Are they bait or food or maybe for an experiment? I know someone who feeds mice to snakes. Is it something like that? Now everyone is watching Mrs. Tibbets to see how's she going to react. Ben waits for her to get mad, but she doesn't. Her lips scrunch up, almost like she's trying not to smile. "Go over the words one more time, Ben," she says. "I brought the mice in to show the second graders. And we're not talking about snakes today. Maybe some other day." Mrs. Tibbets goes back to the front of the room and begins to talk about the difference between warm-blooded and cold-blooded animals. Ben is only half listening. He already knows all of that. But he hears a word that makes his heart skip a beat in his chest. "Snakes?" He looks back at the mice again, and then up at Mrs. Tibbets with her gray hair and her cracked fingernails and her baggy sweater and her hiking boots. I'm wondering what Mrs. Tibbets plans on using these mice for. Well, we'll have to read some more in chapter 2 next time. I hope you enjoyed the beginning of our book. Good luck answering your questions, and I can't wait to see you and read with you again soon. Bye!